Victoria Sterling laughed so hard she had to grab the podium to keep from falling. $700, she repeated into the microphone, wiping her eyes. $700 for that pile of rust. The entire auction floor laughed with her, the buyers in their pressed shirts, the assistants, the men who'd come to flip cheap tools for profit. Everyone laughed. Everyone except the quiet mechanic standing in the back with his little girl's hand in his. The man who had just raised his arm and bought the one thing in that warehouse nobody else would touch. What Victoria Sterling didn't know was that the junk trailer she was mocking held a secret worth more than her entire company, and that in 90 days she'd be the one begging him to take her money back. Before we begin, do me a favor. Tell me in the comments what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled tonight. And if you believe a man's worth was never meant to be measured by his bank account, hit that subscribe button and stay with me all the way to the end. Because this one, you're going to want to finish. The gavel came down like a rifle shot. Sold $700 to the gentleman in the back. For a second, nobody moved. Then the laughter started. It rolled across the warehouse floor slow and mean, the kind of laughter that isn't really about anything funny. The kind men use when they want to feel bigger than they are. Marcus Hale didn't laugh. He just lowered his arm, folded the paddle in his hand, and looked straight ahead at the auctioneer. "That's me," he said quietly. His daughter Lily stood pressed against his side. She was 11, small for her age, with her mother's dark eyes and a jacket 2 sizes too big because Marcus had bought it to last 2 winters instead of 1. She tugged on his sleeve. "Dad," she whispered, "everybody's looking at us." "Let 'em look, sweetheart." "Dad, that thing is broken. The tires are flat." "I know." "Then why?" "Because sometimes," Marcus said, keeping his voice low and even, "people throw a thing away because they never learned how to look at it. Come on." The woman at the front of the room turned around slowly in her chair. Victoria Sterling was 52 years old, and she wore money the way other people wore perfume. You could smell it before you saw it. The watch on her wrist cost more than Marcus's truck. She owned Sterling Automotive Group, and she owned the auction company running this whole warehouse, and she'd only come down here today because her lawyers said the quarterly liquidation looked better with the CEO's face on it. She hadn't expected to be entertained. But this was better than a comedy show. "Excuse me," she said, and the laughter died down so people could hear her. "Excuse me, sir, I have to ask. Do you actually know what you just bought?" Marcus met her eyes. A trailer. She smiled, and it was a beautiful, terrible smile, the kind that had ended 100 negotiations before they started. "No. What you bought is a rusted-out frame with 4 dead tires and about 40 pounds of dirt. What you bought is scrap metal that isn't even worth the gas to haul away, and you paid $700 for it." She shook her head almost gently, almost like she pitied him. "This is exactly why some people never gets ahead. They don't know the difference between an investment and a hole in the ground." The room laughed again. Lily's face went red. She looked up at her father, waiting for him to shrink, waiting for him to get small. The way she'd watched grown men get small around people like this woman. Marcus didn't get small. "You're probably right, ma'am," he said. And then he did something nobody expected. He smiled an easy, tired, honest smile, and he added, "But it's mine now, so I guess it's my mistake to make." Something flickered across Victoria's face. Just for a second. She wasn't used to being agreed with. Disagreement she could crush. But this quiet man just handing her the win and walking off with his prize anyway, that she didn't have a play for. "Sign the release with the clerk," she said, turning back around. "And good luck getting it up your driveway." Marcus took Lily by the hand and walked to the clerk's table. The clerk was a heavy-set man named Danny, with a clipboard and a nervous way of not looking anybody in the eye. He slid the paperwork across. "Lot 417, Danny mumbled. "The old trailer. You sure about this, buddy? I can probably still cancel it if you—" "I'm sure. It's just—" Danny lowered his voice. He glanced up toward the front of the room, toward Victoria, and then back down. "Look, between you and me, they've been trying to move that thing for 2 years. Nobody wants it. It came out of the old Sterling storage yard, the one they closed down. It's been sitting under a tarp since before I started. Marcus's pen stopped moving. Since before you started? Yeah. How long you worked here? 3 years, give or take. Marcus looked at him. It was a small look, but it was the first flicker of the man he used to be, a man who noticed things other people walked right past. So this trailer's been under a tarp taking up floor space in a building where floor space costs money for 3 years, and they never scrapped it. Danny shrugged. I don't make the calls, man. No, Marcus said. I'm just saying. That's a funny thing to hold on to if it's really worth nothing. He signed his name slow and careful. Marcus Hale. You mind if I ask you something, Danny? How'd you name tag? Marcus tapped his own chest. You said it came out of the old storage yard. You remember anything else about it? Anything at all. Danny hesitated. He glanced toward the front of the room again, and this time Victoria wasn't looking. She'd gone back to her phone, and something in the man's shoulders relaxed a half-inch. I remember the manager telling us not to open it, Danny said quietly. Marcus went still. Not to open it. There's a panel on the side, bolted shut. Foreman told us first week I was here, don't mess with the bolted panel on 417, just leave it tarped. It's inventory corporates dealing with it. He shrugged again, but it was a different kind of shrug, now the kind that had a question buried in it. I always figured it was just, junk they hadn't gotten to. But you're right. 3 years is a long time to keep junk. You mind telling me who the foreman was? Gone, retired, moved to Arizona, I think. Danny took the signed paper back. Listen, you didn't hear any of this from me. Okay, Ms. Sterling, she doesn't like it when people talk about the yard. There was some kind of thing years ago. Lawyers. Nobody says much about it. Marcus took his copy of the receipt, folded it once, and put it in the inside pocket of his coat, right over his heart, the way a man carries something he's decided to protect. Thank you, Danny, he said. You've been more help than you know. They loaded the trailer with a borrowed forklift and 2 teenagers who kept snickering about the $700 special. Marcus paid them $20 each and thanked them by name and didn't say a word about the snickering. Lily watched him do it, watched her father stay steady while grown boys laughed at him, and she filed it away, somewhere she'd remember for the rest of her life. The trailer barely fit behind the truck. The dead tires had to be dollied. The whole thing groaned when they finally chained it to the hitch. As they were pulling out of the lot, a black car eased up alongside them. The window came down. Victoria Sterling looked out from the back seat, one arm draped along the door. Change your mind yet? She called. Marcus rolled his window down halfway. About what? I'll give you your $700 back. Cash. Right now. Save you the trouble of hauling that eyesore all the way home just to realize you wasted your Saturday. For a moment, Marcus just looked at her. And here's the thing. Victoria didn't understand, would not understand. For another 3 months, the offer told him everything. A woman with a private jet and a corner office does not chase a mechanic across a parking lot to buy back scrap metal. Nobody does that. Nobody wastes 30 seconds of their day on something that's actually worthless. No thank you, Marcus said. Her smile tightened. It's a generous offer. It is, and I'm going to say no. $800 then. There. I just made you $100 for doing nothing. Take it. Ma'am, Marcus said, and there was something almost kind in the way he said it. You keep raising the price on a thing you just told a whole room was worthless. You might want to think about why you're doing that. The window on the black car went up so fast it nearly caught her fingers. The car pulled away. Lily stared at her father. Dad, she offered you $100. We could use $100. I know we could, baby. So why didn't you take it? Marcus put the truck in gear. The trailer groaned behind them. You ever watch somebody at a card table, he said, who's real calm, right up until the second you touch their money, and then all of a sudden they can't sit still? No. Well, that's what a person looks like when they're bluffing and they just realized somebody might call it. He pulled onto the highway. She wants this trailer, Lily. She wants it bad. And a woman like that doesn't want anything unless it's worth a whole lot more than $700. They drove the 40 miles home to Cedar Falls in the dark, the trailer rattling and complaining the whole way, and Marcus Hale spent every mile of it thinking about a bolted panel that a foreman had been told 3 years ago never to open. The garage sat behind the house, a two-bay shop with a concrete floor and a wood stove, and every tool Marcus owned hung on pegboard walls in an order only he understood. It wasn't much, but it was his free and clear, the one thing he'd managed to hold on to after the medical bills and the funeral and the long gray years that came after. He backed the trailer in under the work light and stood looking at it. "You gonna fix it?" Lily asked. She'd changed into pajamas, but she wasn't going to bed, not tonight, not with her father wearing that look. "Not yet." "Then what are you doing?" "Reading it." "You can read a trailer." Marcus almost laughed. "Yeah, come here, let me show you something." He crouched down by the wheel and pointed. "See this axle? It's rusty." "It's rusty, sure, but look past the rust. Look at the shape of it. You see how it's got that little curve there and those two mounting points instead of one?" He ran his thumb along it, clearing dirt. "That's not a storage trailer axle. Somebody who builds cheap trailers for hauling hay does not spend the money on an axle shaped like that. This axle was built for something that moves fast and needs to sit low. This is a racing part, Lily. Or it came off something racing." Lily frowned. "It's a trailer, though." "It is now. But somebody built this frame out of parts that don't belong on a trailer." He stood up slowly, his knees popping, and walked the length of it, his hand trailing along the metal. "Whoever made this knew exactly what they were doing. This isn't junk that fell together. This was built by somebody good." He'd stopped at the side panel, the one that was bolted shut. It was a rectangle of steel about 3 feet wide, riveted and bolted along all 4 edges, painted over so many times the paint had cracked into a dry riverbed of gray. Every other access panel on the trailer had simple latches. This one didn't. This one had been sealed like somebody meant it to stay sealed. Marcus put his hand flat against it. "Dad," Lily said. "What's behind there?" "I don't know yet." He tapped it with a knuckle. It gave back a low, hollow sound, and then beneath the hollow a second sound, a denser one, like there was something inside not touching the walls. "But there's something in there. It's not empty." He didn't open it that night. Lily didn't understand why. She stood in the doorway of the garage, arms crossed against the cold, watching her father just stand there staring at a bolted panel like it was going to talk to him. "Why don't you just open it?" she finally said. And Marcus said something she'd remember years later when she was grown, when she understood it. "Because once you open a thing, you can't unopen it. And I want to know what I'm looking at before I look at it." He turned off the work light. "Go on to bed, baby. It'll still be here in the morning." But Marcus didn't go to bed. He sat at the workbench under a single lamp, and he pulled out his phone, and he did something he hadn't done in 6 years. He logged into an account under a name that wasn't quite his. M. Hale Restorations, a profile he'd let go dark the week his wife Sarah got her diagnosis. Back when he was somebody else. Back when men flew him across the country to look at cars they'd paid millions for, because Marcus Hale could tell you just by putting his hands on a chassis whether it was the real thing or a beautiful lie. He'd walked away from all of it. He'd let the world forget him. It had been easier that way, easier to be nobody, easier to grieve where nobody was watching, easier to raise a little girl in the quiet. But tonight, he opened a message window, and he typed a name he hadn't spoken out loud in years. "Walter. You still checking this thing? It's Marcus. Marcus Hale. I need your eyes on something." He attached a photo of the axle. Then after a moment's thought, a photo of the bolted panel. He set the phone down and waited. He didn't have to wait long. The phone buzzed. Walter Prine was 81 years old, the last living historian of a racing era most people had forgotten, and apparently he still didn't sleep. "Well, I'll be damned. Marcus Hale. Thought you were dead. Not dead. Retired. Same thing for a man like you." "Where'd you get that axle?" Marcus typed slowly. "Storage auction. Bought the whole trailer it's mounted on. $700. There was a long pause. long enough that Marcus watched the three little dots appear and disappear and appear again. Then Walter wrote Marcus, "Send me a picture of the whole trailer. Right now. Every angle. And don't you dare open that panel until you talk to me." Marcus felt something cold move down the back of his neck. "Why not?" "Because if that's what I think it is, son, you didn't buy a trailer. You bought a coffin. And there's a car buried in it." Marcus stood up so fast, the stool tipped over behind him. He went back out to the garage in the dark, turned on the work light, and photographed every inch of the trailer, the frame, the welds, the axle, the mounting brackets, a strange reinforced spine that ran along the bottom that he'd noticed but not understood. He sent them one by one. Walter didn't respond for 11 minutes. Marcus counted every one of them. "Then call me." The old number. Marcus called. "You still there, Walter?" "Barely." The old man's voice was thin and dry as paper, but there was something under it now, something Marcus recognized because he was feeling it too. Excitement. The particular electric hum of a man who has spent his whole life waiting for one specific thing to walk through the door. "Marcus, I need you to sit down." "I'm standing." "Then hold on to something." Walter breathed. "You ever hear of the Sterling prototype, the original one? Not the company. The car." Marcus went quiet. "Sterling like Sterling Automotive, yes. But before it was a company worth billions, before Victoria's daddy turned it into a suit and tie operation. It was a race shop. One shop. 6 men. And in 1971, those 6 men built a car by hand that was 15 years ahead of anything Detroit or Europe had. An open-frame prototype. They called it the Ghost on account of how fast it disappeared down a straightaway." Walter's voice caught. "It ran one race. One. Set a lap record that stood for 2 decades. And then it vanished. Never sold. Never scrapped. Never seen again. Every collector in the world has been hunting that car for 50 years. Men have spent fortunes chasing rumors of it." Marcus's mouth had gone dry. "Walter, it's a trailer. There's no car on this thing. It's a flat storage trailer." "Is it?" Walter said softly. "Or is it a car that somebody 50 years ago welded a skin over so nobody would ever recognize it? You told me the frame's got a reinforced spine down the center. Storage trailers don't have spines, Marcus. Race cars do. You told me the axle's got dual mounting points and it sits low. Storage trailers don't sit low. You told me there's a panel bolted shut and painted over on the side." Walter paused. "Son, what if the trailer is the car? What if somebody hid the most famous missing race car in America by turning it into the ugliest thing in the yard, so ugly and so worthless that for 50 years not one single person ever looked twice?" Marcus turned and looked at the trailer. He looked at it the way you look at one of those pictures that's a vase, until suddenly it's 2 faces, and then you can never see the vase again. The proportions. The wheelbase. The low hunched shape of it under all that rust and all that ugliness. It wasn't a trailer sitting on a frame. It was a frame that somebody had dressed up as a trailer. "Oh my God," Marcus said. "Now you see it. Walter, Victoria Sterling was at that auction today. She runs the whole thing now. Marcus stopped. His blood ran cold. "She tried to buy it back, in the parking lot. She chased me down and offered me my money back. Then she offered me more." The line went dead silent. "Walter, Marcus," the old man said, and now his voice had changed completely. All the excitement drained out of it, replaced by something careful and grim. "Listen to me. Listen close. If Victoria Sterling tried to buy that trailer back off you today at that price in that parking lot, then she already knows." "Knows what?" "That it's not a trailer. That it never was." Walter exhaled slowly. That trailer sat in her family's private yard for 50 years under a tarp marked "Do Not Open." You don't mark a thing "Do Not Open" for 50 years and forget why. Somebody in that family knows exactly what's welded inside that skin, and it got sold today by mistake. Some clerk, some liquidation list, somebody checked the wrong box. And the second Victoria Sterling saw a mechanic haul it out of her warehouse for $700. "She panicked," Marcus finished. "That's why she chased me. That's why she kept raising the offer. She wasn't being generous. She was trying to get it back before I figured it out. Before you opened it, Walter said. Marcus, whatever you do, do not open that panel until I get someone out there. There are provenance issues. Legal issues. If that car is what I think it is, it's worth 8 figures, and the second you crack that panel with nobody watching. The Sterling lawyers will say you planted it, faked it, God knows what. You need witnesses. You need documentation. You need to do this right, or that woman will bury you in a courtroom so deep your granddaughter won't dig out. Marcus stood very still in the cold garage, one hand on the frame of a car that 50 years worth of the richest men alive had failed to find, that he'd bought for the price of a used lawnmower. And he understood all at once exactly what kind of storm was about to break over his small, quiet life. Walter, he said, how much if it's real? How much is it worth? The old man was quiet a moment. The last verified car from that shop, and it wasn't even the Ghost. It was one of the ordinary ones sold 4 years ago for $22 million. Walter let that number sit in the silence. The Ghost Marcus, the one that ran that one race and vanished the holy grail of American racing. There is no price, because it's never come to market. You could name your number, any number, somebody would pay it. Marcus lowered himself slowly onto the tipped-over stool he'd righted without noticing. 22 million, for the ordinary one. He thought about the mortgage he'd nearly missed last spring. He thought about Lily's winter coat, bought big to last 2 years. He thought about the way Victoria Sterling had wiped tears of laughter from her eyes and told a whole room that this was exactly why some people never got ahead. And then he thought about the way she'd chased his truck across a parking lot. Walter, he said quietly, get me those witnesses. Get me a lawyer if you know one, because I've got a receipt in my coat pocket with my name on it, and a bill of sale, and a whole room of people who watched that woman sell me this trailer for $700 while she laughed in my face. He looked up at the shape in the dark. She made her choice in front of witnesses, and I'm not giving it back. That's my boy, Walter said. That's the Marcus Hale I remember. Now before I let you go, there's one more thing you need to know, and I want you sitting down for it. I'm sitting. 6 men built that car in 1971. 6. I knew every one of them. 5 are dead now. Walter's voice softened into something almost tender. The 6th, the young one, the kid who did the metalwork, the one who welded that skin on and hid the ghost, so it'd never be found. Nobody ever knew what happened to him. He disappeared right around when the car did. Some folks said he took it. Some said the Sterlings ran him off. A pause. His name was Raymond Hale. The garage went very quiet. Marcus, Walter said gently. Any chance that means something to you? Marcus Hale stared at the reinforced spine of the car in the dark, and his hand resting on the cold metal began very slightly to shake. That was my father, he whispered. I know, son, Walter said. I've known since you sent me the first picture, because there's exactly one man alive who'd look at a rusted trailer at a nothing auction in the middle of Colorado and see a race car underneath, and that's the man who was raised by the fella who hit it. His old voice went rough. You didn't find that car by accident, Marcus. It found you. 50 years it waited in the dark for the one person on earth who'd know what he was looking at, and you walked into that room and raised your hand. Down the hall. A light clicked on. Small footsteps. Lily appeared in the doorway of the garage in her 2 big pajamas, rubbing her eyes. Dad, I heard you talking. Who are you talking to? Marcus looked at his daughter. Then he looked at the shape in the dark that his own father's hands had built and hidden half a century ago. And for the first time since Sarah died, since the day the world went gray and stayed gray, Marcus Hale felt something crack open in his chest that he'd thought was gone for good. Come here, baby, he said, and his voice wasn't quite steady. Come here. There's something I need to tell you about your grandfather. And 40 miles away, in a glass office on the top floor of the Sterling Tower, a phone rang on Victoria Sterling's desk at 2 in the morning, and a nervous voice on the other end said the 11 words that would begin the unraveling of everything she'd built. Ms. Sterling, it's about lot 417. We think he knows. Lily crossed the cold garage floor in her bare feet, and Marcus pulled a milk crate up beside the workbench for her to sit on. Your grandfather, he started, and then stopped because he didn't quite know how to say it. Baby, you know how I never talked much about him. You said he passed when you were little. He did, when I was 9. Marcus rubbed his face with both hands. But before that, Lily, before I ever knew him as just my dad, your grandfather was one of the best men who ever built a race car with his own 2 hands. And 50 years ago, he built something so special that people are still looking for it today. Lily's eyes went to the trailer. That. But it's ugly. Marcus laughed, and it surprised him the sound of it in the quiet. Yeah. He made it ugly on purpose, sweetheart. He made it the ugliest thing anybody ever saw, so that nobody would ever look close enough to see what was underneath. He put his hand back on the cold metal spine. He hit it, and then he hit it so well that even he never got to bring it back out. And now, 50 years later... It found you, Lily whispered. Marcus looked at his daughter. Who told you that? Nobody. It just... She shrugged the way kids do when they say something true by accident. It sounds like a thing that would happen in a story. Yeah, baby, Marcus said softly. It does. His phone buzzed on the bench. He picked it up. Walter. You still with me? The old man asked. I'm here. Good. Because I made some calls and I need you to hear this before you do anything foolish, and I know you, Marcus, so I know you're already thinking about opening that panel. I wasn't. You're a liar, and you were raised by a liar. God rest him. Walter's voice had the crackle of a man who'd been awake all night and didn't care. Now listen, I got you a witness. Real one. His name's Elias Tran. He's a certified appraiser, does provenance for the big auction houses, and he owes me a favor from about 30 years back that he's never been able to pay off. He can be at your place tomorrow afternoon. But Marcus, that's not the part I'm worried about. What's the part you're worried about? The part where I called an old friend who still keeps his ear to the ground in that world, just to ask real casual whether anybody'd heard rumors about the ghost surfacing. Walter paused. And he told me that 6 months ago, Sterling Automotive quietly hired a recovery firm. The kind that finds lost assets. High-end. Discreet. The kind you hire when you know something valuable of yours went missing and you want it back before anybody else finds it. Marcus felt the cold move down his neck again. 6 months ago. 6 months ago. Walter, the auction was today. If they hired a recovery firm 6 months ago to find this thing, then somebody in that company already knew it was lost, Walter finished. And selling it to you today wasn't a mistake, Marcus. Or if it was a mistake somebody's about to lose their job over. Either way, that woman didn't chase your truck across a parking lot because she felt bad about the $700. She's been hunting this car for half a year, and you just walked out of her building with it, down the hall. Lily had drifted off against the wall half asleep, and Marcus lowered his voice. What do I do? Tomorrow, you do nothing but wait for Elias. Don't open the panel. Don't talk to anybody. Don't answer the phone if it's a number you don't know. And Marcus... Walter's voice dropped. Whatever Victoria Sterling offers you next, and she's gonna offer you something, don't say yes and don't say no. Just say, you need to think about it. Buy yourself time. Because right now, you've got exactly one thing she can't buy, and it's the only thing keeping you standing. What's that? You've got possession, Walter said. The car's in your garage, not hers, and the law's real funny about that, son. It's a lot harder to take a thing away from a man than it is to keep it from him in the first place. So you keep it. You keep it. If she cries, you keep it. If she screams, you keep it. If she offers you a number with more zeros than you've ever seen in your life, you keep it until we know exactly what you're holding. Marcus looked at the sleeping shape of his daughter and the sleeping shape of the car, and he said, I'll keep it. He carried Lily to bed. He did not sleep. He sat up in the kitchen with the receipt from the auction laid flat on the table in front of him under the light, and he read his own name on it, maybe 40 times the way you touch a bruise to see if it still hurts. The knock came at 7:40 the next morning. It was too early and too confident. 3 sharp raps, and Marcus knew before he opened the door that it wasn't a neighbor. 2 men stood on his porch in gray suits that cost more than his truck. One held a slim leather folder. Neither of them was smiling. "Mr. Hale," the taller one said. "Good morning. My name is Preston Vance. I'm senior counsel for Sterling Automotive Group. This is my associate. Might we come in?" "No," Marcus said. The word just sat there on the porch between them. Preston Vance's smile didn't move, but something behind his eyes recalculated. "I understand your caution, Mr. Hale, but I think you'll find this conversation is very much in your interest. We're here to correct a clerical error and to make you whole, more than whole." "Say it from there." "I'd really prefer." "Say it from the porch," Marcus said. "Or don't say it at all. I've got a daughter getting ready for school, and I don't let strangers in my house before I've had my coffee." The associate's jaw tightened, but Preston Vance simply opened his leather folder and produced a single sheet of paper. "A trailer was sold at auction yesterday, under Lot 417, he said smoothly. "That trailer was included in the liquidation inventory in error. It was never authorized for sale. As such, the sale is voidable, and we're prepared to be extremely generous in resolving the matter." He held up the paper. "This is a settlement offer. We will refund your $700, and in recognition of your inconvenience, we will pay you an additional $25,000. Cash. Today. In exchange for the return of Lot 417 and a release of any and all claims." Marcus looked at the paper. He did not reach for it. "25,000, he repeated. "A very fair figure for an item you purchased yesterday for $700. "For a pile of junk," Marcus said. "Yesterday your boss told a whole room full of people that trailer was worthless. Scrap metal. Not even worth the gas to haul away. She said it right into a microphone. There were 100 witnesses." He tilted his head. "And now you're standing on my porch at 7:45 in the morning, offering me $25,000 for it. You want to tell me how a pile of junk went from worthless to 25 grand overnight?" Preston Vance's smile finally faltered, just at the corners. "Market sentimentality, Mr. Hale. Ms. Sterling's late father acquired the piece. She's since developed an attachment to it. Purely personal." "Purely personal," Marcus said. "That why you sent 2 lawyers and not a moving truck, Mr. Hale. Here's what's going to happen, Mr. Vance." Marcus stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind him so his daughter wouldn't hear, and the 2 men actually took a step back. "You're going to take your paper, and you're going to get back in your car, and you're going to tell Ms. Sterling that I said thank you for the offer, but I need to think about it." "There's nothing to think about. This is a limited time. Everything's got something to think about." Marcus folded his arms. "You come back with a moving truck and try to take that trailer without a court order, and you'll find out real fast that a man's property is a man's property in the state of Colorado. And you tell your boss I said one more thing." "And what's that?" "Tell her I said she should have taken the $700 back when I offered it to her for free." I went back inside and shut the door and threw the deadbolt. Through the window, he watched the 2 men stand on his walk for a long moment, conferring before they finally got in their car and drove off. His hands were shaking. He hadn't let them see it. "Dad." Lily was in the kitchen doorway, backpack on cereal bowl in her hands. "Who was that?" "Nobody, baby. Wrong house. Finish up, I'll drive you." But when he came back from dropping her at school, there was another car in his driveway. Not gray. Black. The same black car from the parking lot. Victoria Sterling was standing beside it in a coat that probably cost more than he made in a year, looking at his little house and his little garage with an expression he couldn't read. He got out of his truck slowly. "You lost Ms. Sterling. You turned down $25,000 this morning." She said it flatly, no preamble. "For a trailer you paid $700 for. Do you have any idea how insane that is?" "I've got some idea, yeah. My lawyers think you're being difficult on principle, that you're punishing me for what I said at the auction." She took a step toward him. "So let me apologize, directly. What I said was cruel, and it was unprofessional, and I'm sorry. There. Now can we please be adults about this?" Marcus studied her. It was a good apology. Clean, direct, no excuses. Under other circumstances, he might have even believed it. "You know," he said, "if you'd led with that, I might have thought you meant it." Her face flickered. "I do mean it. You mean the part where you want your trailer back? That part you mean with your whole heart. Marcus leaned against his truck. The apology's just the wrapping paper. You figured a poor man would be so grateful to hear a rich woman say, sorry, that he'd hand over anything you asked for. He shook his head slowly. I've been poor a long time, Ms. Sterling. Long enough to know the difference between somebody being kind to me and somebody managing me. Victoria Sterling stared at him. And for one unguarded second, the mask dropped, and Marcus saw what was underneath. And it wasn't arrogance. It was fear. Naked, cornered fear. What do you want? She said quietly. It wasn't a question. It was a surrender to a negotiation she'd realized she was losing. I want to know what's in the trailer, Marcus said. It's a trailer. Ms. Sterling. It's an old trailer with sentimental value. Your family kept it under a tarp for 50 years, marked "Do Not Open." Marcus watched every muscle in her face freeze. You hired a recovery firm 6 months ago to find it after it went missing from your yard. You offered me my money back in a parking lot 10 minutes after you sold it to me. You sent 2 lawyers to my porch at dawn with $25,000 in cash. He straightened up off the truck. Now you tell me, Victoria, does that sound like a trailer with sentimental value? Or does that sound like a woman who knows exactly what she just lost? The silence stretched out so long, a dog barked 2 houses down, and neither of them flinched. Where did you... Victoria's voice had gone hoarse. Who told you about the recovery firm? And that right there was the whole game. Because a woman who had nothing to hide would have said, what recovery firm? A woman who was telling the truth would have laughed. But Victoria Sterling asked, who told you? And in 3 words, she confirmed everything Walter had said, everything Marcus had guessed, standing right there in his own gravel driveway. Marcus didn't answer her. He just let her hear the sound of her own question hanging in the air, her jaw set. The fear went away, and the CEO came back, all of it all at once, and Marcus watched it happen, like watching a door slam. $50,000, she said. No. 100,000. No. You're being a fool. You're a mechanic. You have no idea what you're holding. No idea how to sell it. No idea how to fight the machine I will bring down on you if you make me. I am offering you $100,000 in cash to walk away from a legal nightmare that will cost you everything you own. Her voice rose. Your house, your truck, that garage. I will tie you up in court for a decade. Mr. Hale and I will win because I have 400 lawyers and you have a receipt, so take the money. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. You keep raising the number, he said. You did it at the auction. You're doing it now. 700, 825,000, 50, 100. He shook his head. You want to know the funny thing, Victoria? Every time you say a bigger number, you tell me more about what's really in that trailer. A woman doesn't offer $100,000 for something worth $100,000. She offers $100,000 for something worth 10 times that. Maybe 100 times. He watched her face go white. So thank you. Every offer you make is another piece of proof. Keep 'em coming. Victoria Sterling had spent 30 years in boardrooms. She had broken CEOs twice her size, taken over companies from men who thought her a joke, buried competitors who underestimated her. And she stood in a mechanic's driveway in Cedar Falls, Colorado, and for the first time in her adult life, she did not know what to say. So she said the thing people like her always say when they run out of everything else. You have no idea who you're dealing with. No, ma'am, Marcus said, but I'm starting to. And so are you. She got in her car and drove off, gravel spitting from the tires, and Marcus stood in his driveway breathing hard, and his phone was already ringing. Walter. She just left, Marcus said. I know, I could feel it from here. What did she offer? Started at 50, ended at 100,000. Walter let out a low whistle that turned into a laugh that turned into a cough. 100,000. Oh, Marcus. Oh, that's beautiful. You know what that means, don't you? That it's real. That she's certain it's real. A woman like that does not gamble $100,000 on a maybe. She knows. She's always known. Walter's voice sharpened. Now listen, Elias is on his way. He'll be there by 2. But something's changed, son, and I need you to be smart. Because $100,000 offer that gets turned down doesn't make a woman like Victoria Sterling go home and think about it. It makes her stop being nice. The lawyers, the money, the apology, that was the easy way. When the easy way doesn't work, people like her go to the hard way. What's the hard way? I don't know yet, Walter said grimly. But you'll know it when it shows up. Keep that garage locked. Keep your daughter close. And keep your phone charged, because I don't think this stays quiet much longer. Elias Tran arrived at 2:15 in a dusty rental car, a compact man in his 60s, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and a canvas bag of tools that clinked when he walked. He shook Marcus's hand with a grip that was surprisingly strong. Walter says you found the ghost, he said by way of hello. Walter also says a lot of things, most of which turn out to be about half true. So let's see what you actually bought. He set his bag down in the garage, looked at the trailer, and went very still. Well, he said quietly after a long moment, that's the ugliest thing I've ever seen in my life. That's what everybody says. No, you don't understand. Elias walked slowly around it, not touching it, just looking, and Marcus recognized the look. It was the same look he himself got when he was reading something with his eyes before his hands. I mean, it's aggressively ugly. It's ugly in a way that took effort. Somebody worked hard to make this thing repulsive. And in my experience, Mr. Hale, nobody works that hard to make a worthless thing ugly. You only bother hiding a thing that's worth hiding. He crouched by the axle, his breath caught. Oh, what? This axle. Elias pulled a small flashlight from his shirt pocket. Marcus, come here. Look at the casting mark, right there under the rust. He scraped at it gently with a fingernail. You see that the little stamp that's not a manufacturer's mark? That's a shop mark, a hand mark. Somebody who built one-off parts in a small shop stamped their initials into this axle when they cast it the way a painter signs a canvas. He looked up and his face had changed. You know whose initials those are? Marcus already knew, but he said, tell me. R.H. Elias's voice had dropped to almost nothing. Raymond Hale. He was the fabricator on the 71 Sterling team. Best metal man of his generation. He signed everything he built right here in this exact spot, in this exact way. I've seen it on 3 verified pieces in 40 years. Elias stood up slowly, his knees cracking, and he looked at Marcus with a strange expression. Hale. Your name is Hale. He was my father. Elias sat down heavily on the milk crate Lily had used the night before. Then you'd better sit down too, he said, because I need to tell you what happens next, and it's going to sound like a movie, and I need you to understand that it's real. Marcus stayed standing. There are 3 men in the world, Elias said, with the money and the desire to own the ghost. I know all 3 of them personally. If this car is real, and I haven't opened the panel, I haven't verified it, but if it's real, any one of those men would pay you between $40 and $80 million. In a heartbeat. Without blinking. He let that sit. But here's what you need to understand about Victoria Sterling, and why she'll do anything to get this back. That car isn't just worth money to her. It's worth her name. Her name? Sterling Automotive is built on a legend, Mr. Hale. The legend of 6 men in a garage who built the fastest car in America in 1971. That story is on their website. It's in their advertising. It's the soul of a company worth $11 billion. Elias leaned forward. But there's a version of that story the Sterlings have spent 50 years burying. And it's this, that after the ghost ran its one perfect race, the Sterling family didn't celebrate. They panicked. Because old man Sterling realized that if the world saw what 6 ordinary men could build by hand, nobody would want the mass-produced cars he was about to start selling. The ghost was too good. It made everything else look like junk. So he ordered it destroyed. Marcus went cold. Destroyed. Ordered it crushed and buried. Erased. And the man he ordered to do it was my father, Marcus whispered. Was your father? Elias nodded slowly. And your father, Mr. Hale, could not do it. He could not take the most beautiful thing 6 men had ever made and feed it to a crusher. So he did something else. He welded a skin over it, turned it into the ugliest trailer anybody ever saw. told Old Man Sterling the car had been scrapped and rolled the trailer into the storage yard right under the old man's nose where it sat for 50 years. Elias's eyes were wet now, an old man moved by something bigger than himself. He saved it. He saved the car by hiding it in plain sight, and he paid for it with his career, because right after that, the Sterlings ran him out of the business. Blacklisted him, called him unreliable. He never worked in racing again. Marcus's throat had closed up. That's why he moved us to Colorado. That's why he moved you to Colorado, Elias said gently. He wasn't a failed mechanic, Marcus. He was a hero who couldn't tell anybody what he'd done, because the moment he told, the Sterlings would have found the car and finished the job. So he kept the secret, even from his own son. Elias wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He died with it, didn't he? 9 years old, you said. He never got to tell you. No, Marcus said. His voice barely worked. He never got to tell me. And there it was. The thing that had been sitting underneath everything since 2 o'clock that morning. It wasn't about the money. It had never really been about the money. Somewhere behind that bolted panel was the last thing his father ever built. The last secret his father ever kept, a message across 50 years and one grave that said, I saved something beautiful, and someday somebody who understands will find it. And that somebody was standing in a cold garage in Cedar Falls with his father's stamp under his thumb. So now you understand, Elias said quietly, why Victoria Sterling can't let you keep it. Because it's not just a car, it's proof. Proof that the Sterling legend is a lie. Proof that the family that built an empire on the story of the ghost is the same family that ordered the ghost destroyed, and that the only reason it survived is because a man they blacklisted and disgraced was braver and better than all of them put together. He looked up at Marcus. If that car comes out from behind that panel in front of witnesses with your father's stamp on it, and the paper trail to prove what really happened in 1971, it doesn't just make you rich, Mr. Hale. It burns her family's story to the ground. And she knows it. That's why she offered you $100,000. That's why she'll offer you more. And that's why when the money doesn't work, she is going to try to destroy you. Marcus's phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again. Then it started ringing, and the number was blocked, and Marcus looked at Elias, and Elias said, Don't answer that. But Marcus answered it. Mr. Hale. It was Preston Vance, the lawyer, and his voice had lost all its silk. I'm calling to inform you, as a professional courtesy, that Sterling Automotive Group has this afternoon filed suit against you in Colorado District Court. We are alleging that the sale of Lot 417 was fraudulently induced, that the item was removed from our inventory without authorization, and that you are in possession of stolen corporate property. Marcus's blood ran cold. You sold it to me. I've got the receipt. The receipt reflects a transaction we contend was void from the outset. We've also filed for an emergency injunction requiring you to surrender the item to a neutral third party pending resolution, meaning, Mr. Hale, that within 72 hours a court order may compel you to hand that trailer over to a warehouse controlled by people we've selected. And I think you understand what happens to an item's provenance once it leaves your possession and enters ours. A pause. Or of course you could still accept our very generous settlement. The $100,000 remains on the table. For now. Marcus looked at Elias, who was watching his face, and had gone pale, and he understood that the hard way had just shown up exactly like Walter said it would. You're gonna take it away from me, Marcus said slowly. Put it in a warehouse you control, and then whatever comes out the other side won't be what went in. Is that it? By the time any judge looks at it, my father's stamp will be ground off, and the paper trail will be gone, and it'll be your word against a mechanic's. There was a silence on the line. And in that silence, Marcus heard the truth. I'd advise you to take the settlement, Mr. Hale, Preston Vance said quietly. Because the alternative is that you spend everything you have fighting a war you can't win, and at the end of it, you lose the trailer anyway, and you lose the house and your daughter watches you lose. 72 hours. Think it over. The line went dead. Marcus set the phone down on the workbench with a hand that was almost steady. Elias was staring at him. They filed suit, Marcus said. Emergency injunction, 72 hours to hand it over. They can't do that. Elias was on his feet. You have a receipt. You have possession. They sold it publicly in front of 100 people. They can try. And they've got 400 lawyers and a friendly judge for all I know, and I've got you and Walter and a receipt in my coat pocket. Marcus turned and looked at the trailer at the bolted panel at his father's 50-year-old secret sitting in the dark. 72 hours. 3 days to prove that the ugliest thing anyone had ever seen was the most beautiful thing in America, before a court could take it away and make it disappear the way Old Man Sterling had tried to make it disappear half a century ago. Elias, he said, how long would it take you to verify it officially? On the record. Documented, photographed, witnessed, so airtight that no lawyer on earth could say it was faked. Elias hesitated. If I open that panel, and it's what we think it is, a full verification with proper documentation, chain of custody, expert affidavits, 2-3 weeks minimum, done right. I've got 72 hours. Then it can't be done right. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Down the road he could hear the school bus, which meant Lily would be home in 10 minutes. Home to a house that $100,000 apology and 400 lawyers were trying to take out from under her. Then we don't do it right, Marcus said. We do it loud. Elias frowned. What does that mean? Marcus picked up his phone and called Walter. The old man answered on the first ring. Walter, Marcus said. They filed suit. Injunction. They want it in a warehouse they control inside 3 days, and we both know what happens to it in there. He paused. So I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. If a thing gets seen by enough people all at once before anybody can hide it, is it still possible to make it disappear? There was a long silence on the line. No, Walter said finally, and Marcus could hear the old man starting to understand. No, son. You can hide a thing from one man. You can even hide it from a courtroom. But you cannot unring a bell that 100,000 people heard at the same time. A pause. Marcus, what are you thinking of doing? Marcus Hale looked at the last thing his father ever built, the secret that had waited 50 years in the dark for the one man who would understand it. And he thought about a woman who had laughed at him into a microphone in front of 100 people and about the 72 hours ticking down over his daughter's head. I'm thinking, Marcus said quietly, that Victoria Sterling made one mistake she can't take back. She humiliated me in public, in front of witnesses, on the record. He set his jaw. So I'm going to give her exactly what she gave me. In public, in front of witnesses, on the record. And I'm going to do it before that injunction ever reaches a judge's desk. Marcus, get everybody you can, Walter. Every historian, every collector, every reporter who ever wrote a word about that car. Elias, make your calls, the 3 men who'd pay $80 million. I want them watching. Because in 72 hours, I'm going to open that panel. His voice didn't shake at all now. And I'm going to make sure the whole world is looking when I do. The plan took shape over the next 30 hours, the way things do when a man has run out of everything except nerve. Walter worked the phone from his kitchen in Arizona, calling names. Marcus had never heard, mostly the last keepers of a story the world had half forgotten. Elias worked the other side, the money side, the 3 men who could write a check for $80 million without touching the principal. And Marcus worked the one thing only he could do. He got the trailer ready. Not to open it. Not yet. Just ready. You understand what you're risking, Elias said on the second morning, watching Marcus check the panel bolts for the 10th time without turning them. If you open that panel in front of cameras, and it's not the ghost, if it's empty, if it's some other car, if your father hid something entirely different in there, you don't just lose. You become the mechanic who cried wolf. Every collector in the world writes you off. And Victoria Sterling walks away clean because now you look like a fraud. It's the ghost, Marcus said. You don't know that. You haven't looked. I know my father. Marcus set down his wrench. I know the axle's got his stamp on it. I know he was ordered to destroy something beautiful and couldn't do it. I know he hid it so well it took 50 years and his own son to find it. And I know that when a man does something like that, he does it right all the way to the end. He looked at Elias. There's a car in there. It's the right car. I'd bet my house on it. You are betting your house on it, Elias said quietly. That's the whole problem. The phone rang. Walter, You sitting down? The old man asked. Standing. Then hold something. Walter took a breath that crackled. I got you 3 reporters, real ones. One from a big automotive magazine, one from a wire service, and one Marcus one from a national news program. The kind your neighbors watch on Sunday morning. They're all coming. All 3. Because when I told them the ghost might be surfacing and that a billionaire was trying to seize it in court before anyone could see it, every one of them said the same thing. Walter's voice cracked with something like glee. They said that's the story, not the car. The car's just metal. The story is a billionaire trying to make the truth disappear and a working man standing in the way. That's the story people can't stop watching. Marcus closed his eyes. When, tomorrow, 10 a.m. your garage, all 3 plus Elias's collectors dialing in on video, plus every historian I could still get on the phone. A pause. That's about 18 hours from now, son. And I'd bet you every dollar I've got that Victoria Sterling knows it's happening within the hour, because a thing this big doesn't stay quiet, and the second she finds out, she'll try to stop it. She'll try to stop it, Walter agreed. So you keep that garage locked, and you keep your girl close, and you don't open that door for anybody until 10 a.m. tomorrow. You understand me, nobody? Marcus understood. Marcus. I did not sleep that night either. He sat in the garage with the wood stove going and his father's 50-year-old secret in front of him, and around 3 in the morning. Lily came out in her 2 big pajamas and sat on the milk crate without a word, and the 2 of them just watched the shape in the dark together, the way you'd sit up with something that mattered. Dad, she said finally, what if it's not there? Then it's not there. But everybody's coming, the reporters and everything. What if you open it and it's just empty? Marcus was quiet for a moment. You know what your grandfather would say to that? You never met him past 9. No. But I've been thinking a lot about him these last 2 days, and I think I finally understand him, and I think he'd say this. Marcus put his arm around his daughter. He'd say that a man who only does the brave thing when he's sure it'll work isn't brave at all. He's just careful. The whole point of being brave is you do the right thing before you know how it ends. He kissed the top of her head. Your grandpa hid that car not knowing if anybody would ever find it. He did the right thing into the dark lily with no promise anybody would ever thank him for it. So tomorrow, whatever's behind that panel, I'm going to open it in front of God and everybody. And if it's empty? He shrugged. Then at least I did it the way he'd have wanted, loud and honest and not scared. Lily leaned into him. I think it's there, she whispered. Yeah, baby, Marcus said. Me too. The knock came at 6:40 in the morning, and it was not a reporter. Marcus knew it the second he heard it, because it was the confident knock again. And when he opened the door, Victoria Sterling was standing on his porch alone. No lawyers, no black car idling behind her. Just her in a plain coat, her face without the armor for once. May I come in? She said. Please, 5 minutes, no lawyers, just you and me. Marcus looked at her a long moment. Then he stepped back and let her in, and Lily, watching from the hallway, went quiet, the way children do when they can feel that the grown-ups have arrived somewhere important. Victoria sat at the kitchen table. Marcus poured 2 cups of coffee and set one in front of her, and she looked at it like she'd forgotten people did things like that. You've arranged for reporters to come today, she said. 10 o'clock. You've got good ears. I've got 400 lawyers and a lot of money, Mr. Hale. I have very good ears. She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. I'm not going to threaten you. I'm past that. The injunction hasn't cleared yet, and it won't before 10, and we both know it. By the time a judge signs anything, that panel's already been opened on national television, and there's nothing my 400 lawyers can do about a bell that's already rung. She looked up at him. You outmaneuvered me. A mechanic outmaneuvered me. I've been trying to figure out how all night, and I finally understood it about an hour ago. You didn't beat me with money or lawyers. You beat me with witnesses. You took the one thing I can't buy 100,000 people watching at the same time, and you made it your weapon. A thin, exhausted smile. My father would have admired you. He'd have hired you and then destroyed you, but he'd have admired you first. Your father ordered my father to crush that car, Marcus said quietly. Victoria went still. You know about that. I know all of it. I know your grandfather built an empire on the story of 6 men in a garage, and then when those 6 men built something too good, he tried to have it destroyed because it made his real cars look like junk. I know my father was ordered to crush it, and couldn't, and hid it instead, and got blacklisted for the rest of his life for a crime he committed by refusing to commit a worse one. Marcus's voice didn't rise, but it went hard as the axle in the garage. So don't sit at my table and tell me your daddy would have admired me. Your daddy ran my daddy out of the only thing he ever loved and let him die a nobody in Colorado. Your family didn't just lose the car, Victoria. You buried the man who saved it. Victoria Sterling was silent for a long time. When she spoke, her voice had changed. I didn't know, she said. About your father. The name Hale meant nothing to me until yesterday. When the recovery firm briefed me 6 months ago, they told me the car had gone missing from the yard and that we needed to find it before anyone else did, and I assumed it had been stolen. Sold off by an employee. I never once imagined. She stopped. I never imagined the man who took it did it to save it. That there was anything to save it from. I grew up on the same story you did, Mr. Hale. 6 men in a garage. The most beautiful car in America. I put it on our website. I told it to shareholders. I believed it. Her hands tightened on the cup. And you're telling me the whole time the real story was that my grandfather tried to murder that car, and your father died protecting it. That's what I'm telling you. Then I have a problem, Victoria said. Because if that's true, then my entire company is built on a lie, and the proof is sitting in your garage, and it comes out at 10 o'clock. She looked up, and her eyes were wet, and Marcus realized with a jolt that she wasn't performing, that this was the first fully human thing he'd seen the woman do. And I have 12,000 employees, Mr. Hale. 12,000 families whose paychecks depend on a company whose soul is about to be exposed as a fraud on national television. That car doesn't just make you rich and me humiliated. It could end Sterling Automotive. And everyone who works there goes down with it. And there it was, the twist Marcus hadn't seen coming, the one that turned everything sideways. Because up until that moment, this had been simple. Rich woman, poor man, right and wrong, clean as a bell. But now the rich woman was sitting at his table telling him that the truth he was about to detonate would take down 12,000 people who'd never laughed at him, never wronged him, never even heard his name. That's not my fault, Marcus said. But it came out less certain than he meant it to. No, Victoria agreed. It's mine, and my grandfather's. But it'll be their consequence. She pushed the coffee away. I'm not here to threaten you, and I'm not here to buy you off because I finally understand neither one works on you. I'm here to ask you one thing, and then I'll leave, and you can do whatever you decide is right. She took a breath. Is there a way to tell the truth about that car, your father's truth? The real story, everything did, without burning 12,000 innocent people to the ground to do it. Because if there is, I will help you find it. And if there isn't... She stood up. Then open the panel at 10, tell the whole story, and I'll accept what comes. I won't fight you anymore. I'm done fighting you. I just needed to ask before it's too late whether the truth has to cost that much. She walked to the door. Then she stopped with her hand on the knob, and she said one more thing without turning around. For what it's worth, Mr. Hale, your father was a better man than mine. I've known that for exactly 1 day, and it's already changed how I see everything I inherited. Whatever you decide at 10 o'clock, I wanted you to hear me say it out loud. Your father was the best man in that whole story, and mine was the worst. And she left. Marcus stood in his kitchen, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold, and for the first time in 3 days, he did not know what he was going to do. Lily came out of the hallway. She'd heard all of it. Dad, she said, is she the bad guy or not? I can't tell anymore. Neither can I, baby, Marcus said quietly. Neither can I. He called Walter. He told him everything, every word of it, and the old man listened without interrupting, which was not like him. So she's asking you to let her off the hook, Walter said finally. No. Marcus rubbed his eyes. That's the thing, Walter. She's not. She said open it at 10, tell everything, and she won't fight me. She's ready to lose. She just asked if there was a way to tell the truth without taking down 12,000 people who never did anything to me. He paused. And I don't have an answer. Walter was quiet for a long moment. Marcus, he said slowly. Can I tell you something I probably should have told you 2 days ago? What? Your father and I weren't just acquaintances. I knew him. Well, we wrote letters back in the 80s before he passed. And there's a thing he said in one of those letters that I've kept in a drawer for 40 years, and I think today's the day you need to hear it. Marcus could hear the old man moving around a drawer sliding open. He wrote it right after they blacklisted him. I asked him if he regretted it, saving the car. Because it cost him everything, Marcus everything, and I couldn't understand why a man would do that. And here's what he wrote back. I'm reading it to you word for word. Walter cleared his throat. He wrote, Walter, I didn't save the car to hurt the Sterlings. I saved it because it was beautiful, and beautiful things deserve to exist, even when powerful men would rather they didn't. If it ever comes out someday, I hope whoever finds it understands that. The truth was never meant to be a weapon. It was meant to be a light. You don't burn a house down to prove there was a fire. Walter's voice broke on the last line. You just open the windows and let people see. The garage was silent. Marcus stood with the phone against his ear and his father's words 50 years old, landing on him like the man himself had walked into the room. You don't burn a house down to prove there was a fire, Marcus repeated softly. That was your father's son, Walter said. That was exactly who he was. Marcus looked out the window toward the garage, toward the reporters who'd be arriving in 3 hours, toward the panel he'd sworn to open in front of the whole world. And he understood all at once what he was actually holding. Not a weapon to destroy Victoria Sterling. Not even a lottery ticket worth $80 million. He was holding his father's whole life, the choice his father made in the dark 50 years ago. The choice to save something beautiful without burning anybody down to do it. And if Marcus opened that panel today just to humiliate a woman and torch a company full of innocent people, he wouldn't be honoring his father at all. He'd be betraying the exact thing his father died protecting. Walter, Marcus said, I need to make some calls before 10, and I need you to help me. Anything. The reporters are still coming. The car still comes out from behind that panel in front of everybody on the record, so it can never disappear again. That part doesn't change. Marcus's voice was steady now, steadier than it had been in 3 days. But the story changes. I'm not going up there to burn down the Sterlings. I'm going up there to tell the truth my father wanted told. About a beautiful thing that 6 men built and 1 brave man saved. And if that truth happens to be hard on the Sterling name, well, the truth is the truth. But I'm not going to sharpen it into a knife just because I can. Walter was quiet a moment. You know that if you tell it soft, you might not get your 80 million. A humiliated Victoria Sterling settles fast and quiet to make it go away. A Victoria Sterling. You didn't destroy. She's got room to fight you over the ownership for years. I know. You'd be leaving a fortune on the table to protect a woman who laughed at you and 12,000 people who never even knew your name. I know, Walter. Your father would be proud of you, the old man said, and hung up before Marcus could hear his voice break the rest of the way. At 9:15. The first news van pulled up outside the little house in Cedar Falls. Then a second. Then a third. Neighbors came out onto their porches. Marcus watched from the garage as the reporters set up cameras and lights and cables running across his gravel driveway, and Elias arrived and squeezed his shoulder and said, The collectors are dialed in, all 3, watching live. You've got the whole world in your pocket, Marcus. And Marcus nodded and didn't tell him he'd decided not to use it the way everybody expected. At 9:40 another car arrived, the black one. Victoria Sterling got out. And she wasn't alone. Preston Vance, the lawyer, got out of the passenger side already on his phone, and Marcus's stomach dropped because he'd let himself believe her. And now here she was with her lawyer, and maybe the whole kitchen table performance had just been one more move in a game he kept thinking he'd won. But Victoria walked straight up to him past the cameras, and she said loud enough for the reporters to hear, Mr. Hale, before you open that panel, I want to say something on the record. The cameras swung toward her. Marcus's heart was pounding. This was it. This was where she'd try to take it all back. Discredit him, spin it 400 lawyers worth of damage control in a plain coat. 6 months ago. Victoria Sterling said into 3 national cameras. My company hired a firm to recover this car, which we believed had been stolen from us. We were wrong about a great many things. We were wrong about the car. We were wrong about the man who took it 50 years ago. And I was wrong about the man standing next to me, whom I insulted in public 2 days ago, in a way I am deeply ashamed of. She turned to face the cameras fully. Before Mr. Hale opens that panel, I want it recorded that Sterling Automotive is dropping its lawsuit against him effective this morning. Preston the filing. Preston Vance, looking like a man who'd argued against this the whole drive over and lost, held up his phone. It's done, he said tightly. Withdrawn. As of 90 seconds ago. The reporters erupted. Questions flew. Victoria held up a hand, and they quieted, because that was a thing she knew how to do. Whatever is behind that panel, she said, belongs to Marcus Hale. Legally, morally, and in every way that matters. He bought it. It's his. And I would ask him, though. I have absolutely no right to ask him anything. She turned to Marcus, and her voice dropped, and it was just the two of them again for a second in front of all those cameras. To tell the true story of what's inside. Not the story that's easiest for me. The true one. Because I've spent 2 days learning that the truth was in your family's keeping this whole time, and it's not my place to shape it. It's yours. And Marcus understood what she'd done. She hadn't come to fight him. She'd come to disarm herself in public, to drop the lawsuit in front of the cameras, so there was no taking it back, to hand him the whole thing wide open, and then ask for the truth instead of dreading it. She'd done the brave thing into the dark, the same thing his father did, the same thing Marcus had decided to do at 10 o'clock. She'd beaten him to it. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to the reporters and the collectors watching on their screens, and the neighbors on their porches, and the daughter standing in the garage doorway in a coat bought big to last 2 winters. My name is Marcus Hale, he said. I'm a mechanic. 2 days ago I bought a trailer nobody wanted for $700, and a lot of people laughed at me, and one of them standing right here, and she's already apologized, so I'm not gonna make her do it again. A ripple of surprised laughter from the crowd. But I need to tell you about my father before I open this, because this was never really about a car. My father was a man named Raymond Hale, and 50 years ago he was asked to destroy the most beautiful thing he ever helped build. And he couldn't do it. The driveway went dead silent. Even the reporters stopped moving. So he hid it instead, Marcus said. He welded it into the ugliest trailer anybody ever saw, and he rolled it into a storage yard, and he let the world think he was a failure and a nobody, and he died in Colorado without ever telling his own son what he'd done. He kept a secret for 50 years to protect something beautiful from powerful men who wanted it gone. And he left one clue only I would ever understand, because he stamped his initials on an axle the way he'd taught me to look for when I was a boy before he passed. Marcus's voice caught, and he let it. So when I opened my hand at that auction, I wasn't buying a trailer. I was answering a message my father sent 50 years ago into the dark, not knowing if anybody would ever hear it. He put his hand on the first bolt. He told a friend of his once in a letter that the truth was never meant to be a weapon. That you don't burn a house down to prove there was a fire. You just open the windows and let people see. Marcus looked at Victoria Sterling, and something passed between them that the cameras caught but would never fully understand. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm not here to burn anybody down. I'm just gonna open the windows. I took the wrench, and he set it on the first bolt, and every camera in that driveway pushed in close, and the 3 richest collectors in the world leaned toward their screens, $80 million deep. And Lily held her breath in the doorway, and Walter listened on a phone 800 miles away, and Victoria Sterling closed her eyes. And Marcus Hale began to turn the bolt his father had tightened 50 years ago. The first bolt fought him. 50 years of rust had welded it into place, and for a terrible second, Marcus thought it wouldn't turn at all, that his father had sealed this thing so tight it would take a torch, and there was no torching it now, not with 3 cameras and $80 million watching. He leaned into the wrench. His knuckles went white. "Come on," he muttered under his breath. "Come on, Dad, let me in." And the bolt broke free with a screech of metal that made half the driveway flinch and turned, and Marcus let out a breath he'd been holding for 50 years without knowing it. "One," he said. Nobody spoke. Somewhere a reporter whispered into a live mic, "You're watching Marcus Hale open a panel that's been sealed since 1971. And even that whisper felt too loud. The second bolt came easier. The third fought him again. Elias stood at his shoulder with a camera of his own, documenting every turn chain of custody on the record, exactly the way you do it, so no lawyer on earth can ever say it was staged. The fourth bolt. The fifth. Marcus's hands were slick with sweat and rust, and Lily had come out of the doorway, now standing at the edge of the crowd, watching her father do the thing his father did 50 years ago in reverse. 6, Marcus said. 7. There were 12 bolts. At the 8th, Victoria Sterling made a small sound. Not a word. Just a breath sharp, and Marcus glanced at her, and she had her hand pressed over her mouth, and he realized she was more frightened than anybody there, because whatever came out of that panel was going to rewrite the story of her whole family, and she was standing in front of 3 cameras, waiting to find out how. 9, Marcus said. 10. Preston Vance had stopped looking at his phone. 11. The last bolt. Marcus set the wrench on it and stopped. He looked up, out at the cameras, out at the faces, out at his daughter. "My father sealed this with his own hands," he said quietly enough that the mics strained to catch it. 50 years ago. I'm the first person to touch these bolts since, so if you'll forgive me, I'd like to take this last one out slow." And he did. He turned it by hand, a quarter turn at a time, and the whole driveway held its breath with him. And when the 12th bolt came free and dropped into his palm, Marcus Hale closed his fist around it like it was the last thing his father ever gave him, because in a way it was. Then he set his fingers into the seam of the panel and he pulled. For a moment, it wouldn't come. 50 years of paint and rust holding it shut. Then it gave all at once with a groan, and the steel skin his father had welded over the most beautiful car in America swung open on hinges nobody had known were there, and the driveway went absolutely silent. Marcus couldn't see it at first. His own body was in the way, and he heard the crowd behind him make a sound, a collective intake of breath before he even turned to look. And when he stepped aside, when the cameras caught what was behind that panel, Elias Tran, 62 years old, 40 years in the business, a man who had appraised the rarest machines on earth, put his hand on the trailer frame to keep himself standing, and said in a voice barely above a whisper, "Oh my God, it's real. It's really real." Because there beneath the ugly welded skin, wrapped in oilcloth gone brittle with age, was the low, impossible, gorgeous silhouette of a car that 50 years of the richest men alive had failed to find. The ghost, not a rumor, not a legend. Metal and glass and hand-formed aluminum, exactly where Raymond Hale had hidden it, waiting 50 years in the dark for the one man who would understand. The cameras pushed in. The reporters forgot to narrate. And on 3 separate screens, 3 of the wealthiest collectors in the world leaned so close their faces filled the frame. Marcus reached in gently and drew back a corner of the oilcloth, and there on the flank of the car, hand-painted 50 years ago by a man who'd been ordered to destroy it, was a single word in faded silver script. Sarah. Marcus went very still. "Dad," Lily said from the edge of the crowd. "Dad, what's wrong?" Because Marcus had gone white, and his hand was shaking on the oilcloth, and he couldn't speak for a moment. "Sarah," he finally said hoarse. "He named it Sarah." Elias frowned. "The car had a name none of the records ever mentioned a name. Who's Sarah?" And Marcus turned around, and his eyes were wet, and he looked at his daughter, and he said, "Your mother's name was Sarah Baby." His voice broke clean in half. "And so was your grandmother's, my mother. She died when I was 7, 2 years before Dad passed. He built this car the year before she got sick." He put his hand flat against the faded silver letters. He named the most beautiful thing he ever made after the woman he loved, and then he was ordered to destroy it. And he couldn't crush a thing with her name on it. Don't you see? That's why he saved it. It was never just about the car being beautiful. He couldn't finish. He stood in his own driveway with 50 years collapsing on top of him, at once his father and his mother and his own dead wife all folded into one faded word, painted on the side of a car, and the cameras caught all of it. A grown man undone by 6 letters his father had painted before Marcus was even born. And it was Victoria Sterling who stepped forward. She didn't say anything to the cameras. She walked up next to Marcus, and she looked at the name on the car, and then she looked at Marcus, and quietly, "Just for him," she said. "My grandfather ordered a man to destroy the thing he'd named after his dying wife." Her voice was thick. "God forgive us. God forgive my whole family. I didn't know. I swear before all these people, I didn't know what we were really asking that man to do." "He knew you didn't know," Marcus said, wiping his face with the back of his rust-stained hand. "That's what my father would have wanted you to hear. He never blamed the ones who didn't know, only the ones who did and looked away anyway." For a moment, the two of them just stood there, the mechanic and the billionaire in front of a car named after two dead women, and the whole world watching. And something ended between them that had started as a war and turned into something neither of them had a name for. Then Elias cleared his throat gently because somebody had to. "Marcus," he said, "I have to tell you something now on the record because these gentlemen are watching." He nodded at the screens. "And it's my professional duty. This car verified documented with the provenance you now have. The auction papers, your father's stamp, the whole story told publicly and on the record is the single most valuable American automobile in existence. There is no comparable sale. There is no ceiling." He looked at the three screens. "Gentlemen, would any of you care to open?" And the first collector, a soft-spoken man in Connecticut, whose family had made its money in steel, said without any drama at all, "50 million, to start." The driveway made a sound. 55, said the second from a study lined with books in London. 60, said the third, and he was smiling, "and I'll fly out this afternoon." Elias held up a hand toward the screens and turned to Marcus and said quietly, "You don't have to answer any of them right now. You don't have to do anything right now except breathe. That number's not going down. It'll be there tomorrow and next week and next year. Take your time." But Marcus wasn't looking at the screens. He was looking at his daughter. And Lily was looking at the name on the car. Sarah, her mother's name, her grandmother's name, and she'd started to cry quietly, the way kids cry when they understand something too big for them. And Marcus crossed the driveway and knelt down in front of her and took her face in his two rust-stained hands. "Hey," he said. "Hey, look at me, baby." "It's got Mom's name on it," Lily whispered. "I know. Grandpa put Mom's name on it. Grandma's name," Marcus said gently. "But it's the same name, and I don't think that's an accident, Lily. I think some things run in a family, like a river runs through a valley. Your great-grandpa loved a woman named Sarah so much, he named the most beautiful thing he ever built after her. And 30 years later, I met a woman named Sarah, and loved her the same way, and we made you." He wiped her tears with his thumb. "That car waited 50 years in the dark for me to find it, and when I did it turned out to have your mother's name on it. Now you tell me that's just money, baby. You tell me that's just a number those men are shouting into a phone." "It's not just money," Lily said. "No," Marcus said. "It's not." He stood up. He turned around. $60 million sat waiting on 3 screens, and every reporter in the driveway had their eyes on him, and Victoria Sterling stood beside a car her family had tried to murder, and Marcus Hale Mechanic made the decision that would define the rest of his life, and he made it out loud so nobody could ever say it hadn't happened. "I'm not selling it." Elias blinked. "Marcus, I heard the numbers. $60 million. I'm a mechanic who nearly missed his mortgage last spring, so believe me, I heard him." Marcus's voice was steady. "But my father didn't hide this car for 50 years so his grandkids could turn it into a check. He hid it because it was beautiful, and because it had the name of a woman he loved on the side of it, and because some things are worth more than what a man will pay for them." He looked at the 3 screens. "So I want to thank you, gentlemen. $60 million is more respect than I've been shown in my whole life, and I mean that. But this car isn't for sale. Not for 60 million. Not for 600. The Connecticut collector, the soft-spoken one, was quiet a moment. Then he said, "Mr. Hale, may I ask what you intend to do with it?" And Marcus surprised even himself with how fast the answer came, because it had been forming somewhere in him since 3 that morning, sitting in the dark with his daughter. "I'm going to put it in a museum," he said. "A real one, where anybody can see it. where a kid whose dad works with his hands can walk in on a Saturday and stand in front of the most beautiful car in America and read a little plaque that says a working man built it and another working man saved it, and neither one of them ever got rich off it, and both of them did it anyway. Because that's the story my father wanted told. Not that the car was worth $60 million, that it was worth saving even when it wasn't worth a dime to anybody but him. The driveway was silent. And then from somewhere in the back, one of the neighbors started to clap. And then another. And then all of them, the whole street, the porches full of people who'd watched a mechanic get laughed at 2 days ago. Now watching him turn down $60 million, and the reporters were forgetting to be objective, and even Preston Vance, the lawyer, had his hand over his mouth. And Victoria Sterling was crying openly now. "Mr. Hale," she said, and her voice barely worked. "May I say something, on the record, to all of these cameras?" Marcus nodded. She turned to face them. And this was the second twist nobody in that driveway saw coming. Not the reporters, not the collectors, not Marcus himself. "My family built a company on a lie," Victoria Sterling said into 3 national cameras in front of the entire country. "We told the world Sterling Automotive was born from the story of 6 men and a beautiful car. And that part was true. But we never told the rest, that when those 6 men built something too good, my grandfather tried to destroy it because he was afraid it would make his profits look small. And the only reason that car exists today is because a man named Raymond Hale, whom my family blacklisted and ruined, was braver and better than everyone who signed his paychecks." She took a breath. "I've spent 2 days learning that my inheritance was built on the ruin of a better man. And I can't give Raymond Hale his career back. I can't give him his name back while he was alive to enjoy it. He died in Colorado a nobody because of what my family did to him." Her voice cracked. "But I can do this." She turned to Marcus. "Sterling Automotive is going to fund that museum," she said. "Every dollar of it. And it will bear your father's name, not mine, and not my grandfather's. The Raymond Hale Collection. And the first thing anyone will read walking through the door is the true story. All of it, including the part where my family tried to bury the truth and a mechanic wouldn't let us. I'll put my grandfather's shame on the wall in bronze if that's what it takes to honor your father's name." She wiped her eyes hard, angry at herself. "It's 50 years too late, I know that. But it's the only thing I have that's worth anything, so I'm giving it to him. To both of you." And Marcus Hale, who had come into this driveway, ready to fight a billionaire, stood there and could not find a single word, because the woman who'd laughed at him 2 days ago had just done the bravest thing he'd seen anybody do in years in public with nothing forcing her to but her own conscience, and there was nothing left to fight about at all. "My father," Marcus finally managed, "would have hired you. Then he'd have told you to slow down and think before you promise the whole world something on live television." A ripple of laughter, wet and grateful, ran through the crowd. "But he'd have hired you first." Later, after the cameras were packed and the news vans were gone, and the neighbors had drifted back inside after the 3 collectors had signed off one by one, each of them saying some version of "Mr. Hale, if you ever change your mind," and each of them, Marcus suspected, knowing he never would. After all of it. Marcus and Victoria stood alone in the garage with the car, the ugly skin peeled back, the name Sarah glowing faintly in the work light. "You know you could have destroyed me," Victoria said quietly. "This morning. You had every card. You could have opened that panel and told the whole story sharp instead of soft, and I'd have deserved it, and my company would be finished, and you'd have your 60 million and your revenge both." She looked at him. "Why didn't you?" And Marcus told her about the letter. About his father blacklisted and finished writing to an old friend that the truth was never meant to be a weapon. That you don't burn a house down to prove there was a fire. You just open the windows and let people see. "You don't burn a house down to prove there was a fire," Victoria repeated softly. She was quiet a long moment. "My grandfather would never have understood that. Not in 100 years. To him, the truth was a weapon. Everything was a weapon." She looked at the car, at the name, at the man beside her. "Your father understood something mine never did. That you can win without leaving a body on the floor." A small broken laugh. "It took me 52 years and losing to a mechanic to learn it." "You didn't lose," Marcus said. I lost the car. I lost the lawsuit. I lost the argument. I stood in your driveway on national television and admitted my family's whole legend was a lie." She shook her head. "That's a loss by any measure I was ever taught." "No," Marcus said. He looked at her, and he wasn't gentle exactly, but he wasn't hard either. He was just true, the way his father had been true. "You lost the things that were never really yours. The car was never yours. Your grandfather ordered it killed, and my father saved it, so it was always ours. The lie was never worth keeping. And the fight." He shrugged. "The fight you gave up on purpose this morning at my kitchen table, when you asked me if there was a way to tell the truth without burning down 12,000 people. That wasn't losing, Victoria. That was the first thing you ever did that your grandfather would have been ashamed of, and my father would have been proud of." He held her eyes. "You had to lose the person your family made you into. That's not the same as losing." Victoria Sterling stood in a mechanic's garage in Cedar Falls, Colorado, in front of a car named after a dead woman she'd never met. And for the second time that day, she cried, but it was different this time, and both of them knew it. "Your father," she said when she could speak. "Raymond, I wish I'd known him." "So do I," Marcus said quietly. "So do I. I was 9 when he passed. I'm 44 now, and I found out who he really was 2 days ago from a car." He put his hand on the frame his father had built. "But you know what, I think this is how he wanted me to find out. Not from a story somebody told me. From this. From opening the panel with my own hands and seeing what he did with his." He was quiet a moment. "He waited 50 years to introduce himself to me. And when he finally did, he did it by proving that the ugliest thing in the yard was the most beautiful thing in America, and that the man everybody wrote off was the only one who ever told the truth." Marcus's voice was thick. "That's a hell of a way for a father to say hello to a son, 50 years late, but worth the wait." Outside, the last news van pulled away, and somewhere in 3 different time zones, 3 billionaires were telling their friends about the mechanic who turned down $60 million and 800 miles away. Walter Prine sat in his kitchen with an old letter in his hands, crying. The good kind of tears an old man cries when he's lived long enough to see a thing come right. And in the doorway of the garage, Lily Hale stood watching her father and the woman who used to be his enemy stand together in front of a car with her mother's name on it, and she understood in the way children understand things. They'll only have words for years later that she had watched her father become the man his father was, right there out loud in front of the whole world, and that nothing about their small, quiet life was ever going to be small again. The story ran everywhere by that evening. The mechanic who found the ghost. The billionaire who confessed on live television. The car named Sarah, that 50 years of the richest men alive had failed to find sitting in a garage in Cedar Falls under a skin of rust. By morning, Marcus Hale's phone had 900 voicemails and a battery that wouldn't hold a charge, and he stood in his kitchen watching his own driveway on the little TV, watching himself kneel down in front of his daughter, and he turned it off because he couldn't watch it a 10th time. "You're famous, Dad," Lily said, eating cereal at the table like it was any other Tuesday. "I'm tired is what I am." "You're famous and tired." Marcus almost laughed. Then the phone rang again, and this time it was a number he knew, and he answered it. "Walter." "You seen the news?" the old man asked. "I've seen enough of it to last me the rest of my life." "Good. Then you're ready for the part they haven't figured out yet." Walter's voice had that edge again, the one Marcus had learned meant a card was about to turn over. "Marcus, sit down." "I'm getting real tired of being told to sit down, Walter. Sit down anyway." The old man waited until he heard the chair scrape. "Last night, after the whole world watched you open that panel, I got a phone call from a lawyer. Not a Sterling lawyer, an estate lawyer. Out of Denver. And he asked me if I could put him in touch with the son of Raymond Hale." Marcus went still. "Why?" "Because your father Marcus left something behind, 50 years ago, and it's been sitting in a safe deposit box in a bank in Denver ever since, with the fees paid up in advance out of a small trust waiting." Walter's voice went quiet. "The box has a name on the paperwork. It says it's to be opened by Raymond Hale's child or grandchild in the event that the ghost is ever recovered. Your father set it up, son. Before he died." He knew someday somebody would find that car, and he left something for whoever did. Marcus couldn't speak for a moment. His hand had gone to his chest, to the inside pocket where he'd carried the auction receipt for 3 days, right over his heart. He knew, Marcus said. He knew I'd find it. He knew somebody would. He just hoped it'd be family. Walter cleared his throat. The lawyer says you and Lily need to be there in person, both of you. There's something in that box he wants opened in front of the child and the grandchild. And Marcus the lawyer wouldn't tell me what's in it. Said your father's instructions were clear as day. Nobody opens it but Raymond Hale's blood. They drove to Denver the next morning. Marcus and Lily, the same old pickup, the faded paint. Elias met them there, and Victoria was there too, standing outside the bank in a plain coat, and Marcus was surprised to see her until she said quietly, "I know I've got no right to be here, but I asked the lawyer if I could come just to stand outside, because whatever's in that box is the last thing your father ever left in the world, and my family's the reason he had to hide it. I wanted to be here when it opened. I'll wait out here. She stopped. I needed to be close to it, that's all." Marcus looked at her a long moment. Then he said, "Come in." "Marcus, my father spent 50 years keeping this secret from powerful people who would have destroyed it. But he didn't do it because he hated the powerful. He did it because he loved the beautiful. There's a difference, and I think if he were here, he'd want the woman who confessed her whole family's sin on national television to see how the story ends." Marcus held the door. "Come in, Victoria." The safe deposit box was long and shallow and heavier than it looked. The estate lawyer, a careful man named Okafor, laid it on the table in the little private room and stepped back, and Marcus stood in front of it with his daughter beside him and his hand on the lid, and for a moment he couldn't lift it, the same way he couldn't turn that last bolt, because once you open a thing, you can't unopen it. "Dad," Lily said softly, "it's okay. Whatever it is, it's okay." And Marcus opened his father's last message to the world. On top was a letter. The paper had gone soft and yellow, and the handwriting was his father's, and Marcus recognized it, the way you recognize a voice you haven't heard in 35 years, all at once, and completely, and his eyes filled before he'd read a single word. He read it out loud. He had to stop twice. "If you're reading this, then the ghost came home and you're the one who brought her. I don't know your name. I don't know if you're my child or my child's child or somebody further down the line I'll never meet. But I know one thing about you, because it's the only way you could be holding this letter. You looked at the ugliest thing in the yard, and you saw what was underneath. That's the whole test. That's the only test that ever mattered. And you passed it." Marcus's voice broke. Lily took his hand. "I want to tell you why I saved her," he read. "Everyone will tell you it was because the car was worth a fortune, or because I was proving a point to the Sterlings, or because I couldn't bear to destroy something beautiful. And there's truth in all of that. But the real reason is simpler, and I never told a soul, so I'm telling you now, whoever you are. I named her after my wife. Your mother, or your grandmother, or somebody you'll only know from a photograph. Sarah. She was dying when we built that car, though we didn't know it yet. And I put every hour I had left with her into that machine because I didn't have the words to tell her what she was to me, so I built it instead. When Old Man Sterling ordered me to crush it, he wasn't asking me to destroy a car. He was asking me to destroy the last thing I ever made with her name on it while she was in a hospital bed across town. And I couldn't. God help me, I couldn't. So I hid her instead, and I let them ruin me, and I never once regretted it, not for 50 years. Nobody in the room was breathing. Victoria had turned away, her shoulders shaking. "So here's what I need you to understand, whoever you are." Marcus read, his voice barely holding. "The car is yours now. Sell her, keep her, give her away. I don't care, and I mean that because the car was never the treasure. The treasure was the choice. The treasure was that when the whole world told a working man that beautiful things belong to whoever's got the money, one working man said, no. Said some things are worth saving, even when they'll never make you a dime. Said the truth is a light and not a weapon. If you remember nothing else I ever leave you, remember that. You don't measure a thing's worth by what somebody will pay for it. You measure it by what you'd sacrifice to protect it. I sacrificed everything for a car with your grandmother's name on it, and it was the best decision I ever made, and I'd make it again 1,000 times. Now go live like that. Go look at the ugliest things in the yard and find what's underneath. Go save something beautiful that nobody else can see. And when they laugh at you, and they will laugh at you, you let them laugh. Because the last laugh belongs to the ones who were patient enough to look. I love you whoever you are. I've loved you for 50 years without knowing your face. Welcome home. Raymond Hale. Marcus set the letter down, with a hand that shook, and for a long moment nobody moved. And then Lily wrapped her arms around her father's waist and pressed her face into his coat, and Marcus put his hand on the back of her head, and the two of them stood there in a bank in Denver, holding on to each other, and a 50-year-old letter, and it was Victoria Sterling, of all people, who finally broke the silence. "There's more in the box," she said gently. "Marcus, under the letter." He looked down. Under the letter was a photograph, black and white, curled at the edges. 6 young men standing in front of a car, arms slung over each other's shoulders, grinning the way men grin when they've just done something impossible. And in the center of them, younger than Marcus had ever seen him, so young, it hurt, stood Raymond Hale with grease on his hands and his whole life ahead of him and no idea yet what it would cost him. And beside the photograph was a small velvet box. Marcus opened it. Inside was a ring. A woman's wedding ring, simple, worn thin, and taped to the inside of the lid was a scrap of paper in his father's hand that said only, "This was Sarah's. I couldn't bury it with her. I buried it with the car instead, so they'd be together. When you find this, you'll understand why. Give it to someone you love that much." Marcus made a sound that wasn't quite a word. "Dad." Lily looked up. "Whose ring is that?" "Your grandmother's," Marcus whispered. "My mother's." He held it up to the light, and it was thin and plain and worth nothing at all to anyone but him. And it was the most valuable thing in the room, by a mile more than the car, more than $60 million, more than anything. He hid it with the car for 50 years, so they'd be together. My mother and the thing he built for her. He closed his fist around it. He knew. He knew whoever found the car would be family. He left her ring for us. And that was the moment Marcus Hale finally understood his father completely. Not the mechanic, not the hero, not the man who'd defied a billionaire. Just a husband who'd loved a woman so much that when the world tried to take away the last thing he'd made for her, he'd rather be ruined than let it go. A man who'd hidden his wife's wedding ring inside a car for half a century, so the two things he loved most would never be apart. A man who'd sent a message down through 50 years and one grave past everyone who ever laughed at him, straight into the hands of a son he never got to raise. Marcus turned to Victoria. "You still think you lost?" he asked quietly. She was crying and didn't try to hide it. "No," she said. "No. I think I got to be in the room when a man came home to his father. And I don't deserve to have been here, but I'll be grateful for it the rest of my life." The museum opened 11 months later. They built it on the edge of Cedar Falls on land. Victoria bought and deeded to a foundation with Marcus's name on the board and her name nowhere on the building because she'd insisted. Because she said the last thing that story needed was a Sterling's name on the door of the thing her family had tried to destroy. They called it the Raymond Hale Collection, exactly like she'd promised on live television. And the day it opened, there was a line down the block. Working men, mostly men with grease under their nails and sons on their shoulders, come to see the car a mechanic built and a mechanic saved. Marcus stood at the entrance on opening day in the nicest shirt he owned, which still wasn't very nice, and he shook every hand that came through, and when people asked him why a man would turn down $60 million, he told them the same thing every time. "Because my father already told me what it was worth," he'd say. And it wasn't $60 million, it was a light. And you don't sell the light. You leave it on for the next fella coming up the road in the dark. The car sat in the center of the main hall under a single spotlight, the ugly welded skin displayed right beside it on purpose, so people could see both the beautiful thing and the ugly disguise that had saved it. and understand that they were the same object, that they'd always been the same object, and that the only difference between worthless and priceless was whether somebody was patient enough to look. And on the wall behind the car, in bronze letters 4 inches tall, was the whole true story. All of it. The 6 men in the garage. Old Man Sterling's order to destroy it. Raymond Hale's refusal. The 50 years in the dark. And at the bottom in Victoria Sterling's own words carved in metal for as long as the building stood. My family built a company on the ruin of a better man. This is our confession and his monument. Victoria Sterling. She'd insisted on that too. Marcus had tried to talk her out of it, told her she'd already confessed enough, and she'd looked at him and said, "Your father put his shame on a car for 50 years so the truth would survive. The least I can do is put mine on a wall." And Marcus hadn't argued because he'd learned by then that some people, once they finally start telling the truth, can't stop, and it's not your job to make them. Walter Prine came for the opening. 81 years old in a wheelchair, now oxygen line in his nose, and Marcus pushed him up to the car himself and let him sit in front of it as long as he wanted. The old man reached out one shaking hand and put it on the frame on the metal. Raymond Hale had shaped 50 years before, and he cried the way old men cry quietly without moving much, and he said, "I outlived every one of them, Marcus. All 6. I'm the last man alive who saw this car race. And I got to see her come home before I go. Your father." He couldn't finish. He just kept his hand on the metal and looked at the name painted on the flank. Sarah. "He'd be so proud of you, son. He'd be so proud. He said hello to me through this car, Walter," Marcus said. 50 years late. I got to meet my father through the thing he built. Not everybody gets that." "No," Walter agreed. "No, they don't." Walter passed away that winter, peaceful in his sleep, and Marcus drove to Arizona for the funeral and found out the old man had left him one last thing: the entire box of letters. Raymond Hale had written him across the years, 40 years of correspondence between 2 men who'd loved the same lost car, and Marcus read every one of them slowly over the next year. And in them, he found his father piece by piece, the man's humor and his stubbornness, and his grief and his hope, until Marcus knew him better, dead than most sons ever know their fathers alive. And Lily grew up. She grew up in a town that knew her name, now the daughter of the man who found the ghost. But that wasn't the thing that shaped her. The thing that shaped her was watching her father turn down $60 million and watching him forgive the woman who'd laughed at him and watching him choose the light over the weapon the same way his father had. She grew up understanding in her bones the thing it takes most people a whole lifetime to learn, if they learn it at all. That a person's worth was never in what they had, and never in what people thought of them, and never in what somebody would pay. It was in what they were willing to save when saving it cost them everything. She went to college, first in her family. She studied history and then restoration, and then she came home, and she took over the museum, and she took over the workshop her father had built beside the house, and Marcus taught her everything he knew, the way his father would have taught him if the world had let them have that time. And on the day Lily turned 25, Marcus took her out to the garage where it had all started, the 2-bay shop with the wood stove, and he put a small velvet box in her hand. She opened it. Inside was her grandmother's wedding ring, Sarah's ring, thin and plain and worn. "Dad," she breathed. "This is Grandma's. This is, you can't give me this." He said to. Marcus's eyes were wet. In the note, he said, "Give it to someone you love that much. And I've thought about it for 14 years, baby, ever since we opened that box, about who I loved that much." He closed her fingers around the ring. "It was always you. From the day your mother and I made you, it was always you. You're the one who whispered to me in that garage that the car was there before I ever opened the panel. You're the one who said it found me. You looked at the ugliest thing in the yard when you were 11 years old, and you saw what was underneath, same as my father, same as me." His voice broke. "You passed the test too, Lily. You've been passing it your whole life." Lily wrapped her arms around her father and held on to him, and the two of them stood in the garage where a mechanic had once looked at a rusted trailer and seen a race car, where a father had introduced himself to a son across 50 years, and one grave where a family had learned the truth about who they came from and who they were meant to be. And years later, when Lily Hale had children of her own, and those children asked her about the famous car in the museum with the woman's name on the side, she'd sit them down and tell them the whole story, start to finish exactly the way it happened. She'd tell them about a single father who bought a broken trailer nobody wanted for $700, while a rich woman laughed at him into a microphone. She'd tell them about the bolted panel and the axle with a stamp on it, and the letter written into the dark 50 years before anybody was there to read it. She'd tell them about the $60 million her grandfather turned down, and the ring hidden with the car, and the woman who confessed her family's sin on national television and put her own shame in bronze on a museum wall. And then she'd tell them the thing her grandfather Raymond had written, the thing her father Marcus had lived, the thing that ran through their family, like a river runs through a valley. She'd tell them, you don't measure a thing's worth by what somebody will pay for it. You measure it by what you'd sacrifice to protect it. And she'd tell them that the world had called that trailer worthless and laughed and walked away, every single person in that whole warehouse. Every single person except one. Because the most valuable things in this world are almost never the shiny ones sitting up front where everyone can see. They're the ones buried under the rust, dressed up ugly, thrown in the back, passed over by every person, too busy or too proud or too certain to look closely. And they belong in the end to the ones patient enough to see them,